So with this, we know that we are running out of time. So we now move to the Q&A session of the second part, and I'll turn over the floor to my colleague, Dr. Dixon Hibanya, to facilitate the Q&A session.
Okay,
Dixon?
yes, thank you very much, Dr. John Tulhin, and I share gratitude for the excellent presentation of our panel presenters. Let us flash the first question. I think the first question is for Dr. Rex Cruz from Gil Mendoza. Dr. Gil Mendoza asks, climate change impacts each ecosystems individually or separately and systematically. What specific indicators were monitored to measure impacts to individual ecosystem? How about the broad system-based indicators? And then let me just go through to a related question from Dr. Diaz. Among the different ecosystems you have shown, which of them is the most vulnerable to climate change? Likewise, the most resilient one. Any quantitative indicators to measure the vulnerability and resiliency of the ecosystems against climate change? Dr. Cruz, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Very difficult questions to answer, but let me address first the questions of Dr. Gil Mendoza. Uh, uh, the specific indicators that were monitored to measure impacts to individual ecosystems included, for instance, habitat quality. You know, the quality of particular natural habitats, whether it pertains to integrity of the natural vegetation cover. So we looked at the fragmentation, for instance. We did fragmentation analysis and then tried to relate this to human activities. Plus, of course, we were not able to go down yet on the combined impacts of climate change and human activities on fragmentation of natural vegetation, for instance. So, and then we also had indicators measured to allow us to understand the impacts on the landscape, on the landscape unit basis, looking at the landscape functions. We did that. We were looking at, for instance, what will be the specific what will be, a good method of assessing the health of ecosystems and the health of watershed and the health of the landscape. But we were not able to go there, as we were not to go as far as that, because what we effectively we only had 1 year of continuous monitoring, and then the project was already stopped on its track. And yeah, but those were where we were going to, trying to analyze the impacts on the functions of ecosystems and functions of the landscape unit. But unfortunately, we were not able to get fresh funding to continue on with the monitoring, so that we can, gather enough information to be able to say, yeah, these are how ecosystems and these are how a landscape, affect or respond to changes in climate, changes in human activities. Now, moving on to the question of Dr. Diaz. uh, Again, by virtue of the limited observations that we conduct during the 2 year, program duration, it is really difficult to say, on the basis of our findings, on the basis of empirical data, which of the different ecosystems are the most resilient and which ones are the most vulnerable. Well, we know, all we know is that when we try to relate, for instance, ecosystems that are um, heavily disturbed by human activities, compared to a similar ecosystem which is not so much disturbed by human activities. We were foreseeing that the disturbed, more disturbed, less disturbed ecosystems is more vulnerable and more at risk to climate change. But again, as I said, it's very difficult for us to substantiate that hypothesis. But we were moving there, but unfortunately, we didn't gather enough data over the limited duration of the program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Cruz, and also for the question of Dr. Mendoza and Diaz. Let's move on to the next question. Yeah, this is also from Dr. Mendoza to Dr. Lasco. Identifying and analyzing climate change-induced factors affecting virus spread, like COVID-19 and other possible virus or pandemic, I think it would be a good contribution of OML. I'm not sure what the state of science is with respect to the impacts of climate change to epidemiology of virus spread. Do you think we have adequate and credible scientific studies on climate change impacts to epidemiology of viral diseases, which we can share or communicate to the public? Dr. Lasco.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mendoza, for that question. Our Philippine Climate Change Assessment Report, which I showed earlier and is available free for download in our website, has a chapter on health, the impacts of climate change on health. And if I remember right, there was a study conducted on dengue, but not on the virus itself, but on the vector, the mosquitoes, and how dengue may spread as a result of warming environment. And there was, if I remember right, some correlation analysis of certain temperature and climate variables, and correlating those with the spread of dengue. And again, from what I'm just from recall, I think they found out that the warmer the environment, then the higher the incidence of dengue is. But other than that, I don't know if there are other studies on viral. I'm just talking about viral and the spread of these diseases. I think we need more of those. Our medical doctors and scientists need to, I think, step up and do some more, or a lot more, on these types of studies. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lasco. Now let's move on to the next question. Okay, to Dr. Stevenson, also from Dr. Mendoza. Can you give a sense of the range of funding levels that APN can or has supported? Any funding limits, caps for CRRP, capable and small grants?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mendoza, for your question. Yes, I can give a sense of the range of funding. Funding is modest. For a comprehensive regional research program, we can fund a research project for up to 3 years. And usually our funding limit is around $45,000 per year. So you can count that as $135 for a 3-year research project. For capable, of course, the RFP has to engage at least 3 countries, 2 of which must be developing countries. For capable, we can have 1 country activities focusing on capacity building. And our limit for capable is usually around $40,000 per year, with projects up to 2 years for capable. For our small grants program, this still is kind of, it started in 2016 as a kind of pilot program. And in our first round, we offered around $15,000. And it's amazing what early career scientists can provide with such a small, modest amount of funds. And we have some very nice outputs. The recent 2019 call for our small grants program for early career scientists, we offered, I think, around $30,000 for 5 projects. Ultimately, we had around $120,000 to spend. Probably in the future, any such activities won't be standalone. for these small grants programs. What we will probably do in the future in our fifth strategic phase is move these kinds of activities under our CRRP program and under our capable program, but they certainly will continue to exist in some form in the future. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Stevenson. You also notice there's a raised hand in our attendees. Dr. Lansigan, do you have a question? You are recognized. Dr. Lansigan is muted. All right. Okay, while waiting for Dr. Lansigan, there are follow-up questions for Dr. Lasco. Yeah, from Christmas Okiyama. You have mentioned that OML act as advisor of some business sectors in the Philippines, such as covering the OML group of companies. I am interested to know your thoughts on how interested businesses in developing economies are when it comes to supporting climate change and resilience. And what advice can you give to approach companies and collaborate with them? Also, how to sustain partnership and support by them.
Thank you, Dixon, and thank you, Christmas, for this question. And first of all, I think there's a huge interest amongst private companies right now on climate. Almost all the major companies in the Philippines, not just the Lopez group of companies. I'm thinking about the Ayala group of companies, the SM group of companies. Most of those companies realize that climate change and climate impacts or climate hazards, like, of course, typhoons, very common in the Philippines, is affecting the way they do business. For example, take insurance. Because of the rising incidence of climate risks and hazards, insurance is getting more expensive. And so they need to be more resilient. They need to do more in order to reduce damage coming from these cyclones and climate extremes. Note also that a lot of these companies have investors from other countries, investors from the US, from Singapore, Australia, and so on. And these investors are demanding greater climate action in terms of mitigation, but also, of course, in terms of adaptation. And finally, even their own consumers are demanding climate action. Consumers are more now sensitive to clean energy, to more, less plastics, and all the things that are affecting also climate and climate change. And so I think, especially the bigger players out there, they are very conscious both of climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And so they are very open. So how to partner with them? Well, typically they have their own sustainability officers. Some will have their own climate, perhaps climate officers, but mainly perhaps approaching sustainability officers and managers like those, and initiating dialogues with them. And I think they'll be very open. And so how to sustain this partnership? Well, you have to deliver, of course, what they need. You have to be able. By the way, please note that we're not really sort of like an arm of the corporate world providing, just servicing them. No, our center is really trying to service the Filipino people or the Filipino society, especially the most vulnerable. It's only a tiny fraction of our work that we provide advisories to our corporate partners. But really, our main work is trying to devise solutions for the most vulnerable people of our country using science. But yes, I would say, please go ahead and continue to work with private sector. They're more open than ever before in climate change type of issues. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rodel, for a positive answer or response. Is Dr. Lansigan
Yes, yes.
Okay, yes,
Good
yes. Please go
morning.
ahead, Dr. Lansigan.
Congratulations to my colleague Rudel, Rex, and Joey, and the rest of the speakers, including Linda. My question is, well, maybe answered by any one of the speakers. Environmental monitoring should be made a component of local government units in local government planning and implementation. Can you suggest, based on your experience, how this can be facilitated or implemented by the LGUs so that it will be more sustainable? Thank you.
Rex, that's probably for you first.
In yeah, yeah. Uh, thanks, for the no, for the good question. In our program, the Modicera program, we actually engage local communities and local government units, realizing that they have the presence in our observation stations, and therefore we tried to we started actually trying to get them interested to be part of the monitoring activities, and we did so in some of our project sites. And whether whether they can be good monitors or not, we're not able to see that. But as to the interests of local government units and local communities, it was there in some of our sites, at least where we were actively, seeking the participation of the local government units and local communities. Can it be done? I think it can be done. I think LGUs can be trained, and I have seen LGUs investing in these kinds of activities, which is above and beyond what their usual concerns are. We have local government units that have hired, for instance, additional personnel to conduct and continue on with our extension activities to upland communities, and we saw that in two LGUs. So, insofar as monitoring is concerned, I think it can be done. It can be done. It just takes additional investment on the part of local government units, and it takes a little more capacity build, well, not a little more, but significant capacity building, knowing that the LGUs really don't have much of the technical capacities required for monitoring. But yes, given the resources, I think LGUs should be, as well as private sector should be, as well as those big government corporations who have jurisdiction, for instance, over watershed management and over large areas of the natural forest. I think they should be required, because now only very few of them are actually doing it. And I can cite some companies like related to what Rodel, was saying, the Lopez group of companies. They're doing that, but it must be a required, to most private and local government entities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir Rodel, would you like to respond as well to that question?
No more. I think Rex already. I don't know about Linda. Thank you, Enoch,
Okay.
for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Ian Alasigan, for the question. Okay, one last question for Dr. Rex. This is from Dr. Afwan. Congratulations for your Modesera monitoring project. I believe it should continue. It seems that the bats were your favorite models for disease transmission on viral transmission. But monitoring impact change, environmental changes shouldn't the more vulnerable groups like amphibians be the better environment indicators to be monitored? Dr. Dr. Rex, you are muted. Kindly please unmute your Zoom.
Thank you very much, Dr. Afwang, for the question. Yes, you are very correct. Amphibians they are group. I mean, they are um, good indicators actually of impacts, particularly of climate change. The drying up, the heating up of the environment. They are very sensitive to those, and we were actually looking at those groups of wildlife, during our program, and and yes, there are others. For instance, we also looked at small organisms, found in rivers, the macrobenthos, and so on. Okay, so we tried to look at them as well. They are, to our sense, a good indicator of impacts of human activities and impacts of changing climatic conditions. Yes, these are, you actually mentioned one of the more likely indicators of impacts of environment. I just saw, Dixon, let me respond to the question, to the query of, to the issue concern of Dr. Marian de Los Angeles, because I
Yes, sir.
saw
Yes,
that
sir.
on top of Dr. Afuang's question. She was actually, suggesting that if Mudisira is to be revived, it should directly support the Philippine systems of environment and economic accounts where valuation of economic services are planned to be continued in the future. Actually, that's very true, Dr. Marian. It was actually one directions that we were taking, that we can, and those uh, how do you call that, valuation of economic services was actually one of the modules of our decision support system that were to come out of the outputs of this program. And yeah, this is really one of the outcomes, of Modisra monitoring activities uh, could have actually generated.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Cruz, and to Dr. Afwang and Dr. Marian. It's now 11:17, and I'm going to wrap up this Q&A session. So thank you very much for our panel presenters for the excellent responses, and to those who asked questions. So those questions that were not mentioned, we're going to collate them, and we're going to forward them to the panel speakers for the response. So I'm going to turn over now the floor to the host, Dr. Jan Pulin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dixon, for the excellent facilitation. Just to wrap up everything, we did a simple word cloud analysis using en vivo tool of the different presentations. And here is a snapshot of the word cloud that we were able to generate. And using this as a take-home message, I would say that the prominence of the words climate change and research in the word cloud affirms that addressing climate change remains to be a major challenge in the field of environment and atmospheric sciences. It also reiterates the important role of research or scientific advancement as an initial and necessary step in addressing this challenge. On the other hand, the prominence of other keywords such as human impacts, resilience, and capacity implies to me the need to move from science to action to reduce the human impacts of climate change and other environmental problems and build resilience in the process. It also highlights the important role of capacity development as a key strategy in achieving climate resilient development. Finally, the prominence of keywords such as Philippines, Asia, global, and even Malaysia indicates that atmospheric and environmental problems cut across geographic boundaries and therefore need to be addressed simultaneously at all scales to reduce their adverse impacts. We hope that this parallel session has provided many of us additional knowledge and steered our interest in the fields of environmental and atmospheric sciences. We also expect that it can open opportunities for collaborative undertakings among the Philippine and foreign-based speakers and participants, not only in terms of joint researches, but also other mutually beneficial actions that can help address pressing environmental challenges and build human and environmental resilience towards a better world. With this, we want to express our deepest gratitude to all our distinguished presenters for sharing their valuable knowledge and time that make this parallel session truly a successful one. Even at this time, we are still have 102 participants online via Zoom. On behalf of the President of PAASE, Dr. Gisela P. Concepcion, and my co-host, Dr. Dixon T. Hebanya, we want to express our deepest thanks to the UPLB Information Technology Center through its staff, Dr. John Eric Dao, also the PAASE 8.2 Parallel Session Secretariat, namely Mili Pangilinan, Wela Catujo, and Bea Evaristo for their support to make this parallel session truly a successful one. So thank you all for your participation, and we hope that you have learned from something from this particular session. Before we finally end, we would like to request all the participants, all the presenters to turn on their video for a short picture taking. And finally, before we do that, let me also inform or respond to those who are asking whether PowerPoint presentations will be available. We will request our presenters, if they are willing to share their PowerPoint presentation, probably in PDF format, and we will be posting them at the PAASE website. But let me inform our participants also that we have recorded the proceedings of this parallel session. We will have a quick edit on it, and it will be posted also at the PAASE parallel session. So those who are asking for a certificate of participation, we can send a participation upon your request. So again, thank you very much, and good day to everyone.